I think let's honor the time for those that are here. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're here. We've been really working hard to bring something that is really practical, user-friendly, but also I think importantly for us when we're preparing something we've all experienced, that we continue to experience in many areas of our lives, both personally and professionally. So if you think about the taming triggers, we all experience them. And what we want to take you through is to explore this relationship with navigating emotional triggers and start saying what are some of the healthy or unhealthy areas that you would like to really work on. For me, if I were to just give you an analogy that I use when I think about my own personal triggers, it's like I'm falling down a staircase that I've used so many times. For some reason, with that person at that moment, when something happens, it's like I've never seen this case of stairs. And then I have to pull myself together to have some sense of, dignity back to pull myself. So it's a very vulnerable session that we're having together. And for us to explore this vulnerable session, I'm going to bring in my co-facilitators to share some personal experience. Over to you, Avril.
Thanks, Bongin. As you said, we've got to be quite vulnerable in sharing this. And sometimes we teach what we most need to learn. So my experience was I was actually flying to Kenya, and I was flying an SAA flight locally to Joburg and then KQ on to Nairobi. And first of all, the South African Airways flight was delayed. So South African Airways assured us that there would be people waiting to meet us. They would rush us across to the Kenyan Airways flight and we would be fine and everything's great. As we land, I noticed the people in front of me getting messages on their phones saying KQ's been cancelled and our flight's not happening. And so I can feel myself getting the stresses just kind of going. So anyway, these so-called people waiting for us at the luggage area, I go up to them, I go, I believe you're assisting us and whatever. And they like kind of look at me as if to say, how dare you interrupt our conversation? So again, blood boils a bit more. I get my luggage and I go strutting along straight to KQ International. Get there, there's a whole queue of irate people, and they go, no, you got to go back to SAA. Your ticket's booked through SAA. So I literally stomped my way back to SAA. By the time I got face to face with this poor woman, I was like, seriously, how is it that KQ's flight's been cancelled? I need to get to my clients. I start facilitating tomorrow. There was another guy who had a function that evening. I said, what are you going to do to help us? What is actually happening? We were told people would assist. And it was like a verbal diarrhea. I just let them have it. Anyway, I said, and I suppose then you're going to tell me I can't get there tonight. So the woman looks at me and she goes, yes, ma'am, you're not going to get there tonight. I said, how can you tell me you're not going to get there? Anyway, the other woman next to her leans over and she goes, what are you talking about? Of course we can get it on, but it'll be a 5 o'clock flight tonight. Now, bearing in mind, this is 11 o'clock. She said, it'll be a 5 o'clock flight tonight, but we can definitely get you on. So the woman who was helping me, she goes, I just told her what she had told me. So, so now I am irate. Anyway, eventually and I wasn't showing up in my best self at all. I get my ticket sorted and now I've got to go across because I had booked a specific ticket. It was soon after my knee replacement. So I needed to have extra leg room. I go stomping all the way back across to KQ. And on the way there, I thought, flip, that really didn't go well. I nearly blew the chance of getting a seat. I'm actually quite embarrassed, almost looking around thinking, please don't let there be any clients anywhere near me or anyone who knows me. So I literally switched gear. I got to KQ and I thought, let me try this differently. And I went up and I said, please, can you assist me? I said, our flight, the KQ have cancelled the flight. We've been bumped onto 5 o'clock. I'd specifically booked a seat and I was really charming and I was really nice. And they went out of their way to help me. And I think I got the best economy flight on the plane. But it was just the change that I had to go through and showing up as my worst self and literally getting stymied at every opportunity. I was so blocked to realizing that I was actually getting in my own way. So yeah, very embarrassing, very frustrating, but I eventually got to Nairobi at 10 o'clock that night.
And Avril, it's so true that showing up as your worst self. And I think that's the thing. It just brings us to this feeling of, oh my word, it's exactly what we don't want. You can see in my background, I'm in Germany at the moment, and I have come here. I got married last week, and the build up to the wedding was just, it was a 5-6 month build up of red tape. And when we say red tape, we mean barriers, blocks, barriers, blocks. And wherever we looked, it was block, block, block. And all we needed was 4 documents from the South African system. And that involves Home Affairs, it involves attorneys, it involves the High Court, it involves the embassies, it involves the agents, and so it went. And over this period, our documents got thrown out of the Stuttgart High Court. They had to go back. They then had expired. I'd hired a car, trekked across gone to Pretoria the day I was leaving, all desperate for these documents. And we ended up getting these documents in 15 minutes before the court deadline. But what happened ensued in the process, and how I completely, where we said to you, lost my shit in it, was because the DHL were meant to collect the document and get it to Germany. And I phoned the woman on the day that the court said, this is the day before the court said, this is your last chance. And she said, oh no, we've got a problem with we had a problem when your document left. So when you're tracking it now, it's actually gone to Heathrow. Okay. And it'll be gone from Heathrow to here. And I can honestly say it was just that the poor woman, she got 8 months worth of my context. And when I had finished speaking to her, I turned around, and you'll see these beautiful little houses. I'm living in one of these, and I'm right up in the loft, and they've got these big wooden beams. And I turned around and I hit my head on the wooden beam. And I threw myself onto the bed, and I sobbed and sobbed. And it's like, whoa, that's not me. What's just happened? So yes, I felt angry, desperate, and I felt so blocked. So yes, Bongi, we've all made ourselves vulnerable here.
Yeah, thank you so much for your vulnerability. What is the one feeling that you would share that resonates with this experience that you went through, Avril?
At the time, frustration and anger.
Carey?
Also the anger and the desperateness from being blocked, but there was also for me self-pity. And that was why I threw myself in the bed and cried. And I'm just not that person that ever does self-pity, but it was self-pity, and I felt deeply embarrassed. I felt it was like that thing of shame where you think, why did I behave so badly?
And that's the one thing about these emotional triggers. If they are left untouched or engaged with, is that we move from yelling and screaming to feeling sorry, to feeling shame, to wanting to hide ourselves, embarrassed, humiliation in some of these instances. But what is interesting is that it's not going to stop. We're going to experience them. I mean, we've been in the EQ space for quite some time. We still experience them. But also, I don't know if you all noticed that when Avril was sharing her story, the quick turnaround. So the tool that we're going to be taking you through is not a tool that is complicated. It's a tool that helps you not only to go through the emotional hijack, but also to post their hijack in terms of the feeling that you experience now that the experience happened. As Carey was talking about, I was crying. I'm not the one to cry. Now, what do I do with these emotions? So what's powerful with the tool that we're going to be taking you through is that it's 3 steps that help you from experiencing it to responding, but also post the hijack. How do we respond? So the point is that it happens to all of us, and therefore, how do we respond to them in such a way that we moved from a place of regret to taking action? So that's what's powerful with our triple R process.
Yeah, so if you look at that quote there, I think it is one of the most apt things, that speak when you're angry and you make the best speech you ever regret. I think we've all felt like that at some stage, and your words can only be forgiven, they're not forgotten. So how do we make sure that we are not ruining our brand? What is the reputational cost to us when we are behaving like this and other people see it and they start to link that to us? And I think a lot of us in the situation, we feel things are blocked, we're feeling trapped, and we just need to get unstuck. We want to be able to move forward in terms of that. So as Bongi mentioned, we are going to take you through a process of what we call the 3 R's, so that you can learn to recognize when you're in this reactive state, then give you tools on how you can respond rather than react. And then how do you recover from this and develop healthier patterns? So we have seen volatility increasing globally. We get the state of the heart reports, we get all of these stats, and we can see that the ability to navigate emotions is one of the most challenging ones. Personally, the lowest one on my EQ profile as well. So it's kind of like, how do these small little things escalate so quickly and blow up into these massive issues? So to understand that, knowledge is power. So I'd like to just take you through a very brief understanding of the brain and how our brain functions. So, we have this thing called the thalamus, and the thalamus acts like the air traffic controller. It is directing all the information into our brains, and it kind of tells it where to go. So the normal thing is the information will go to the cortex, which is known as our rational or thinking brain. And then from there, it'll go onto the amygdala, and then we will take action. However, in a state of threat, when the thalamus feels that we are under threat in some way, that we are being attacked, it realizes that the cortex or thinking brain is too slow. So what it does, and in the diagram, you can see it bypasses that rational brain and it goes straight to the amygdala, because the amygdala reacts really quickly. But the problem with this is that the amygdala reacts in fighting, freezing, or fleeing, which works really well if we are actually in danger. But in most cases, our brains are misinterpreting a perceived danger. And then what happens is our rational thinking is completely disengaged. So even though we are not actually under a physical threat, we react in a way that we actually are. Our flight being cancelled, our papers not arriving, our body reacts in exactly that same way. So it's not about the trigger. It's actually about how we are interpreting this trigger. It's how do we misunderstand it. So if you think about, you're under a lot of pressure and you're working really hard, and somebody says, have you completed that report yet? There are so many different ways we can interpret it, because in some instances, we're going to hear it as, have you done that report yet? And bam, we're going to hit back in terms of that. So why is it that at some stages we are quite tolerant, we're quite patient, we can respond really well, and at other times we are triggered and we just react immediately? So I want you to consider the analogy of the fuse, a fuse of dynamite, or stick of dynamite. So when we have a stick of dynamite, if it has a really long fuse, there's a lot of opportunity to be able to put that fuse out once it's lit before it actually explodes. But if it has a very short fuse, it's lit and it explodes immediately. There's a tiny, tiny interval between the trigger and that explosion. And this is what we refer to as the setup phase. Because in the setup phase, we are either shortening or lengthening our fuse. So if you think about, you've been on holiday and you're really relaxed and you drive to the supermarket and you're pushing your trolley, and the next minute, bam, somebody hits into the back of your ankles, one of my pet hates. But you kind of turn around, you're a bit irritated, and the person says, sorry, it's okay. You're driving and the taxi jumps the red robot or cuts in front of you, and it's, you kind of in your head and think, oh, people are so stupid, but you carry on. It's not a problem. But now fast forward a few weeks, you're back at work and deadlines are piling up. You're under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and similar events happen. Instead of just being able to brush it off, we trigger it and we immediately react and we go, whoa, okay, and we hit back really hard. So that simple question of, have you done the report? In that state, we are triggered and we escalate it straight away. Now, this setup phase is affected by a number of things. So if you can picture yourself in a moment where you have been triggered and you have reacted really quickly and disproportionately to the event, think about maybe what's been going on for you. How many of you experience being hangry? You know, when we're really hungry and we become angry really quickly through that, it's a thing, okay? When we're not sleeping well, when we are only focused on problems, we generally stop exercising, we're eating really badly, and we get into the cycle. So when you think about it, you're working really hard, a lot of deadlines, a lot of issues to deal with, and so you work a bit later. You then leave work late, so you don't have time for that gym session or to meet your mates for a run. On the way home, you're already getting frustrated, traffic's an issue, you get home and the kids are irritating you or your spouse is irritating you or there's something going on. So now the relationship starts to become a bit toxic. You go to bed, and if you're lucky enough to fall asleep straight away, you often wake up at 1 a.m. and you focus on problems. Fall asleep at about 4, alarm goes at 6 to get up and exercise, snooze it, boom, and we don't do it. Probably rush out, don't have breakfast. And I think you're getting the gist of how the cycle goes. So this is what we call the setup phase. And there's no definitive time for this. But as we are experiencing those things, what we're actually doing is we're eating away at our fuse. So our ability to deal with a trigger in that moment is really, really hard. It's one thing when you put your hand on the hot stove, you touch it, you feel the heat, you immediately pull back. You react without thinking. And that saves us. But the problem we have here is that we're going to start doing exactly that, even when somebody just asks us a simple question. Have you finished the report? Can you get this mail to me? What is happening in the meeting? We just don't hear it proportionately. So also think about how your body starts to feel in that moment. We're starting to react, we at the airport, flights cancelled. What starts to happen? You start to clench your wrists, your fists. Your fists are there. Your shoulders start to come up. You have that feeling of heat creeping up your neck. You're clenching your jaw, feeling really, really tight. And what's happening in that moment as well is we are starting to go into this, we're in this emotional hijack. These chemicals start to be released. And what happens is in this emotional hijack, we've had a trigger. Our brains have interpreted as a threat. And so to protect us, they release adrenaline, they release cortisone, and that gives us all this power. The blood is dispersed to the extremities of our body so we can move quicker, we are stronger. And unfortunately, at the same time, our serotonin, which is the feel-good, keep you young hormone, is suppressed. And serotonin is needed for mood regulation, impulse control, helps us to sleep better, and general well-being. So chemically, we become really agitated and emotionally volatile. So for a lot of us, this becomes a vicious cycle of the setup phase, which is not healthy for us. A trigger happens, we interpret it as much worse it is. We feel judged, we feel blamed, we feel attacked, and then bam, the escalation happens and we hit back, or we completely shut down and we withdraw. And as a result of this, we are getting into this vicious cycle, which isn't really healthy for us. It's not helping our relationships, definitely not helping our brand. And we are behaving really, for smart people, we're actually being really unintelligent. Would that be a politer way of saying it? And the problem is we've seen the cycle a lot in the corporate world. We've seen people become more and more reactive, and the repercussions are huge. Bongi, I'm really interested, what are you seeing when you see, I know you did a lot of coaching, you also work a lot in the corporate world. What are some of the potential harmful patterns that we're starting to see as a result of this reactive cycle?
Thank you, Avril, for that. Some of the harmful patterns that we see is where employees or individuals feel stuck, and that can impact in their careers. that can impact their relationships, where maybe the anger gets out of control, where it's a career limiting interaction that doesn't lead to results. Some people feel completely, like one of the things you said that's powerful is that the brain is trying to protect you, and in the protection it gets in the way of your own success, because then you don't show up as the brand that you want to be, the way that you want to be experienced as a leader in the world. So one of the things that I've seen where I have explored this journey with clients is where I help them deal with what you've said in terms of interrupting the pattern that is creating this vicious cycle of being stuck in a way that you are responding. You think you're improving, but you continually do the same thing with different people. So it really impacts the careers, impacts their performance. It impacts also their sense of value and worth. I've had clients where they're starting to doubt their performance because of how they've showed up, where in some cases employees even think of leaving the organization because they are so embarrassed and so engulfed with the shame that they're unable to shake it. So this is a very powerful process in terms of helping people to disrupt those patterns and recognize so that they can reduce them.
Thank you. What Avril's been talking to is the realize part, and Bongi led in really well to when she said interrupt the pattern. She helps people to interrupt the pattern. And this is the part where we talk about responding. Okay. So the first R was to realize what's happening, the setup in your brain. And what Avril was describing to us, it's also referred to as flipping your lid. Okay. And this is taught to tiny children because from toddler age you can begin. And right through to adults. And it's by a gentleman called Dan Siegel. And it's about temporarily losing control of our actions. It's flipping your lid. And he illustrates it with this brilliant hand model. And I want each of you just to take your fist, okay? And we're going to make a model of the brain. And the way he explains it, and it really helps us to move from this fury to focus, which is a respond part, where we start to focus. So if you take the hand and you look at it like this, this brain stem at the bottom here then goes into the limbic area. So the palm is this region, it's the limbic palm. And then you've got a thumb, which you can tuck in quite nicely. And that is your amygdala, which is connected. It's got the thalamus scanning for threat. And this is directly linked to those emotions. And it forms your limbic brain. Then these fingers, you can take them over and wrap them around your thumb. And that forms the brain. The fingers are the prefrontal cortex. So that's your thinking brain. And it wraps over and it forms a very calm, connected brain when it's all working together. But what happens when we flip our lid? It's literally the thumb pushes out and flips these fingers up, okay? Which means the prefrontal cortex is flipped and it's no longer emotions, it's no longer connected. And that means we're no longer calm. We're not connected to the rational brain. We're not making smart choices. Instead, we're just reacting with that fight, flight, flee. So Dan Siegel's little model for you, just to think about when are you flipping your lid, you've got to think of how to bring the rational brain back and get your brain to calm down. So a response is an intentional, slower thing that requires attention from us. And we're going to have to get into a space to do that, to actually calm ourselves down, compared to a reaction, which is just automatic, unconscious, quick. Okay. So Dan Siegel talks about this thing called regulate. You've got to regulate. Okay. Self-regulation, it's managing your emotions, your behaviors, your thoughts, so that you can actually be socially acceptable, which is really what you want to be at work. Okay. And you can be goal orientated. So the little techniques, and in the download that we give you at the end, we've got them for you. In terms of responding, name it to tame it is the thing that Dan Siegel says is absolutely critical. So he's a psychiatrist. They've studied the brain, and he says if you can name the emotion you are experiencing, you will. It connects, starts to connect. Why? Because by naming, you're using your rational brain. It's helping you to connect and bring those fingers closed again to your to that emotional brain. So labeling it gets us distance from it. And we spoke about this in our last webinar. So those of you who joined our Chaos to Clarity webinar, it's leading you back to that. So if you can say, I'm angry, I'm furious, I'm overwhelmed, you're starting to be able to use the tools really successfully. So to take you back to what Avril was showing you here is this reaction cycle. You get into a loop. And the other way to respond, to get yourself out of the loop, is in the 6 seconds, has a 6 seconds pause. It's just simply the thing that you've been probably told from forever, is just pause, stop, give yourself space and step away. Okay. In that cycle, there are choice points, and the 3 points, 1, 2, and 3 are the choice points. So when we respond, which is what we want, not just react like that, when we respond, we must have given it thought. And in being able to do that, it's to know, let me use those choice points and let me have options, okay, to get out of the loop. So the first one is, in terms of prevention, is better understand your setup. Like for me, it was building. I know it was building. And actually the poor lady at DHL who had rerouted the document via Heathrow to get to Germany, she got the brunt of everything. But actually that setup had been building. And things, when you're lacking sleep, I had traveled. When I arrived, this is called my KLM dress, by the way. My family noticed this because when I arrived, I had no luggage. And I came from Johannesburg in the freezing cold winter to a heat wave in Europe. And I was in jeans and jackets and all sorts. So that's part of the setup. Then I had no luggage and had to go and buy a dress in the colors of KLM to actually try and adjust. So when you have sleep you need, and traveling you don't get that, you in that setup phase and something's going to come. So being better prepared. And then the rehearsal is that time where we actually look at, so then what to next? Okay, where do I go with that? I'm noticing the emotional triggers and being able to pause. What else does this mean? What does it really mean for me? And then going into, from escalation, picking a moment to de-escalate. Okay, the emotional regulation tools there are things like breathing, and just stepping away, trying to remove yourself, calming your nervous system so that you don't go in this loop again, and then the loop again, and then the loop again. And then another excellent tip for this is reframing. And reframing is, how do I look at the situation differently? Okay. And there's a question bank I use in my EQ courses. It's a 30 question bank on reframing. Is what are the types of questions you can ask yourself in the moment? And one I find very useful is, what will this look like a year from today? Okay. And it just shifts and gives you the perspective to respond appropriately, and is this really the root of the problem here? And I think if I'd used those tools in the moment more effectively, I maybe wouldn't have given this poor lady from DHL a full brunt of everything. So this is important it's important at this point to challenge your thoughts, to check your assumptions, and not to spin into the next cycle and then to escalate and spin into the next cycle. So as Avril said, we're seeing more and more in the global research from 6 seconds how volatile people are, and that the skill of navigating emotions is declining. And there are a lot of emotions at work. There are a lot of big emotions at work. So we are less able to handle challenging situations, which means we need to hardwire the 3 steps that we're offering you, okay, which was realize to start with what's happening in your brain, which is what Avril was sharing with you, and then pick some ways in which you are going to respond that are not the automatic fueled reactivity, and slow yourself down for that. So Avril, do you have a technique that you use that is quite useful when it comes to conflict?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a thing called the PEEP. The acronym is PEEP, and you can do it really quickly in your head. And it's literally what I used when I was at the airport, literally losing my shit. It was, am I only seeing things from my perspective? Am I exaggerating it, imagining the situation to be worse than it is? You know, it's like when we keep telling the story over and over again about what somebody in the office did to us, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Am I excluding the other person's perspective or possibly their value to me? Because sometimes when we're so set on doing things in our own way, we just don't hear what other people are saying. And then am I personalizing this? Either taking it as an attack on me, or in the case of my flight issue, am I attacking the other person instead of trying to get clarity and address the issue? Because so often conflict comes from a difference of opinion, which is about an issue. It's not about ourselves personally or about the other person's. And that's where we can tap into our empathy as well, to actually check in and say, you know, if we were considering these questions, what would our behavior look like? And that's literally what I did in that short walk across. I went from stomp to stroll as I calmed myself down, and I considered that this person was just doing a job. And she had had a million people shouting at her that day, and I was just another one.
Yeah.
So yeah, a really helpful technique that you can use at any stage and in managing conflict as well.
Yeah, that I love that Pete. And this fury to focus thing, it's all about taming emotional triggers is a choice. And we have to work at it because our brain will automatically go into react. So from this ability to respond, Bongi, over to you for what do we do then? Like, what does recover look like?
Yeah, thank you for that. So if now having you seen what Avril and Carey have shared, is that you almost get out of sync with how you would normally, react, or how you normally show up with others. So it feels like you're completely out of track. Like think about someone where the computer is out of line. I mean, the computer is out of offline. So the recovery is about bringing you back in line, in terms of saying, how do I make sure that I don't stay into that reaction cycle? So the intention of recovery is to look at how do we get you back on track in terms of navigating your state, so that you can link back to how you want to be experienced. So I'm going to take you through the recovery process. So with the recovery process, there is no right or wrong way of exploring this. So the way that we've looked at the recovery stage is so that you can go back into sync. So I'm going to invite you to take you through this cooling down phase. So imagine recovery was a room. So imagine a room. It's not a physical room. It's just your a non-physical sanctuary that's taking place in your internal psyche. What would that room look like? Okay. When we think about this room, I'd like you to think about, what name would you give your room? Remember when we said name it to tame it, when Carey said name it to tame it? Here we want to name to transform. So this recovery room that you've created, give it a color, paint the walls, do whatever you want to do, take whatever shape you want to take. This is your safe space. Remember, when you're going through a hijack, you feel vulnerable. You feel like you need a psychological safe space to recover. So this room must make you feel at home, so that you can calm down your nerves, as Carey said earlier on, that you experience that your thinking part of your brain is not available. So to calm yourself down, this is the recovery room, so that you don't get yourself into that vicious cycle. So give your recovery room a name. I hope you have done that. So let me give you some examples of how you can give your recovery room a name. You can call it shame to pride, or anger to calm, fury to triumph, shame to respect, shame to dignity, from regret to recovery, from regret to taking action. Make it fun, exciting, because this is something that psychologically is going to help you to tap into, especially post the hijack. The intention, what we have found in our experience, is that you can understand the steps post the hijack. Sometimes we stay longer in the rehearsal. I sometimes joke last night when I was preparing that the rehearsal could look like season 6 of Scandal, as an example, because you keep looking at this horrible movie, horrible series, like in season 5, in season 6. And this is what one client of mine said, that I just kept playing this tape. So the reason for this recovery is just to have a sense of what this tape is going to look like. So now I'm going to take you through the pause and reset stage. Okay, so with the pause and reset, we are intending for you to self-distance, to have a moment to breathe so that you can lock your brain back to the thinking part of your brain. As a carrier said, that you have no access to it. So that whole pausing and reset is to physically lock in back to your thinking part of the brain so that you can access solutions, so that cognitively you can engage into a thinking conversation where you are engaging with yourself. So what therefore is your physical release? Type in the chat. I haven't seen anyone typing in the chat their names. I'd love to hear some of the creative ways that you're coming together with your recovery room. Please type in the chat so that we can learn from each other, because we all have experienced this. We all have been in those places where we say, how do I physically connect back to myself? Okay, so some will breathe, some will take a walk, some will exercise. Thank you, Avril. I tend to go into writing. Writing helped me to self-distance. Everything that I go through, I will do a little bit of writing if it's one page, because it helps me to self-distance. Because remember, when we're looking at that reaction cycle, is that the perceptions are also what gets us stuck. And what I've seen with my clients is that they will then do the judgment, and that's why they get stuck into season 6 of Scandal. Thank you, Heidi, with the box breathe. I'd love to know what that looks like. I go outside and just absolutely something quick that you can easily do. It doesn't have to be complicated, just something that you can quickly do that helps you come back into it helps you to get into your recovery room. The other thing is the grounding that you can do, where you engage to your senses. I mean, Avril mentioned everything that she went through in terms of understanding her 6 senses. It's a very quick process. It might feel like when we're taking you through this, like it's going to take years. It's a very quick process, as you've seen with her a travel experience. This is just to help you to engage back with yourself, where you are feeling grounded, you are feeling present, because that rehearsal, by the way, it's something that has happened. Even if it happened 6 seconds ago, it's something that has happened, it's in the past. So that pause and reset quickly helps you to be grounded so that you can be present. I see people have typed in the chat, I'm excited. Take a nap and pray. Absolutely, it also works. Sleeping. I know people that do sleep. Music. I hear a lot of people will play music that just brings them back or hypes them out of this vicious cycle, this mode of feeling regret. Love what I'm seeing in the chat, connecting to nature.
And that mantra, having a mantra, thing that you say that Shireen's got there, you know, this is not an emergency, I'm safe. It's just like tell yourself.
Love that. Love that. Thank you, Carey. I didn't see it. Love the mantras, because you're feeling unsafe, you want to save. So it's almost moving your brain to the other side of, just like you were on that whole being hijacked back to your thinking part of the brain. That's basically what the grounding, the self-soothing, you've mentioned music. This is all intended to create a space between the trigger, the continued reaction, to allowing your rational brain to get a break. You are really trying to say, let's come back here. You are being very deliberate so that emotional surge comes down. Your nervous system is getting a chance to go back to being yourself. Thank you. Now let's move on to the connect back to your why. One of the very most powerful lessons, I don't know about you, Avril and Carey, with 6 seconds strategy is around, you know, when they define what is EQ, is about being smarter with feelings. And one of the biggest lessons that I still carry with myself is that when we're experiencing the emotional hijack, when we're experiencing any form of emotional disruption, where we're feeling that physical sensation that is uncomfortable, that makes us want to hide away from ourselves, who we are, and our journey takes away from our why. And one of the key things that 6 Seconds Drive is connect back to your noble goal. Why do we do what we do? So one of the ways now you've connected to your thinking part of the brain, it allows you to go back. Why am I doing this? Why was I in this meeting? Now the reflection, you're coming back to what's important. Like we've said, that sometimes we get disrupted because someone said something in the meeting, and I think it was you, Avril or Carey, where you were talking about it's our values that get in the way of these emotion when we experience emotional hijack. So that opportunity to connect back to your why stabilizes you back. Now it takes you away from that reaction to say, what was going on? What are some of the values that were challenged, right? Engage and ask yourself, what in your reflection, what are some of the values you were challenged? What are the values that we are creating this disconnect between me and Avril in this meeting? Realign. The realigning is to what's the impact of me showing up like this? Like we said earlier on, that it impacts your brand. It impacts the goal that you want to achieve. It impacts the purpose of why we are having this meeting. So that we have that deeper sense of connecting to why we're doing what we do. So we are realigning what truly matters and preventing this prolonged distress. This is what's beautiful about the recovery. We are cutting that prolonged distress, that prolonged rehearsal that we're doing, so that the perspective is about the bigger picture. Okay, and affirming yourself, the value that you want to embody. Why? So that you can, when you move forward, there's a sense of value and worth. Because one of the things that I've seen with my clients, they're moving away. I mean, this one client who completely, because of a negative feedback, completely got paralyzed with the conflict that took place, and she started to self-sabotage the impact that she was making in the organization. It's very sneaky. So that's why it's important that our recovery is intentional. Now let's look in terms of, moving from that meaning purpose to start talking about extracting the gold, the lessons. Now you connected back to your why, you feel safe, you've given it a name, the music is soothed enough to say, what are lessons? Come, let's now get the gold out of this experience. What happened? What are we learning from these experience? Explore those triggers, right? Because the triggers also have underlying messages. They've got underlying meaning. There's perceptions that you have created about Carey, because Carey reminds me of this, and because of what she said. Now, this is now helping you to contextualize the trigger, so that you are not saying, when this happened, this is who I am. See the difference? Now you're unpacking that trigger so that it's in context. You are continuously building up. You are not painting yourself with the same brush. You are taking the golden nuggets based on what has happened, so that we can get to a space where we transform this challenging experience into something that is a growth and an opportunity. Unpack the message, as I said earlier on. What was I feeling? What was beneath this emotion? Because emotions are data. So anger is about you feeling angry and upset about something that has happened that you value. So now that emotion is helping you to understand what's going on. So it could be that some of the boundaries were affected as a result of what has happened. So it helps you to understand what are some of the unmet needs that you need to engage with. This is giving you information so that you can start saying, what do I need to do? Reflect on the responses, the way that you responded. Like if we go back to Avril as example, that she quickly looked in terms of saying, okay, what do I do next? What is it that I've learned about myself? I have seen how I've shown up. I can change this thing differently, right? What did I learn about myself quickly at that moment? And as she went with that PIP technique that she did, she was able to learn to extract gold, which helped her, by the way. Her intention, if I may share with you, she wanted a bigger space because she had a knee injury. That was a bigger goal. So being able to do that quick experience, you are able then to recover in such a way that you pick what you need. Right. Then now let's look into the last one. This one for me was so important, of having experience as where we take the lesson and then we're done. This is how we then rehearse. We take the lesson, but then we rehearse. What is powerful with the rewrite and repair is that you are now changing the narrative. You are naming it to transform it in that very same room, in the sense that you are taking actions. One of the actions that we take you through is future pacing. I'll encourage you to just type in mental rehearsal. You are taking the very same experience. Remember when I asked you in the beginning, think about a real life experience, be it at work, be it at home, that you're comfortable to presence as we are taking you through these steps. Think about that experience and start to mentally rehearse from a place where you are looking at where you want to disrupt. What would you like to replace with? If we use again Avril, because we all can relate to a story, she immediately, when she got to the other side, changed the way she was engaging in the conversation to get what she wants, which was a comfortable seat to protect herself, which was important for her as she was traveling. So future pacing is about being able, imagine it differently. How will I want to respond? Visualize that response over and over again, so that when it happens again, your brain is already locked in. You've got a mental and a physical sensation of what it would look like when you respond differently. There's a lot of research that has been done around future pacing. One of them that we can all relate again, now that we're talking about traveling, is a research that was done with the accidents where they've observed where there's airplane accidents, where they've learned that where people have listened to the air hostess, have went through the whole process of what do I do when there's an emergency, because your cognitive type of the brain goes in there where it's safe. So future pacing helps you that, so that when this happens again, you have already in your system a data of information that helps you to do that, because you've visualized a response that is calm and effective. Break the cycle, and how you break the cycle is you commit to this new strategy where you replay it, so that your repair is done in such a way that you are responsible, and you are repairing in such a way you are connecting in terms of the things that you need to do. Some of them might be physical, in the sense that I need to apologize to Carey because of the way that I yelled at her, I called her names. That's part of the repair. Part of the repair could be practicing that form of empathy. Part of the repair could be replaying this scenario in such a way that you connect it to a different scenario. I hope this resonates with you. The intention really is to help you to control the next narrative, because what's happening with emotional hijack, we feel that we're not in control. And the recover is to take back that control and saying, next time, this is how I'm going to rewrite the narrative. This is how it's going to look like, and play it in a safe space in that recovery room, and replay it in such a way when it happens again, you've got a different tool. And that's typically what happens with the airplane example, where we replay what will happen in an emergency, and your brain goes into where it feels safe and where it's been replayed so many times. Hence, the rehearsal has to be different, so that that cycle is helping you to respond differently.
Thank you, Bongi. I think that really does capture for us. I mean, when we started, it was about a moment that we lost it. But that moment, I hope today we've given you a context to say there is a setup, there is a cycle, there's a loop, and it's how to break that loop, how to break that cycle. And the repair and rewrite part is really absolutely essential in hardwiring something that is going to be more successful going forward. If you joined the last webinar, you'll know that we give you a free download. The last webinar was Chaos to Clarity, and you got a free download that you could use from 6 seconds. Today in the chat, I'm going to put in, if you've got your phones with you, you can use the QR code. But everything that we've been sharing with you, we've put into this one pager, which is the emotional hijacking, recognize, respond, recover, and those steps for you. I'll place them in the chat now. So that you can also use that link if you want to. But it takes work. Avril, your thoughts?
No, 100%. It does take work. You also have the best opportunity. You know, they always say prevention is better than cure. The setup phase is when you actually have the best opportunity of preventing the escalation. Because what happens if you think of an escalator, you know, when you're at the bottom of the escalator and you've got this long ride up to the top, there's time and there's distance. But what's happening is, as all of these, the setup phase is happening, as our fuse is shortening, we're getting higher and higher to the top of the escalator, which is actually where we're having this kind of explosion. And so many business leaders are at the top of the escalator. They don't realize it. They don't realize their baseline stress level is so high and that they're reactive. And as a result, the whole organization sits at that level. And you start to see leaders defending, fighting, and hiding instead of articulating the vision, you know, that why that Bongi spoke about, because the why keeps us out of so much trouble. You know, if you're in conflict resolution, start with the why. What is it we all want here? And unfortunately, when people don't realize that, they make bad decisions, results in no accountability, the communication suffers, and ultimately, you know, the organization suffers. And all of you are the organization. You're the people. So, you know, you can't change another person, but you can change yourself. And the way you either react or respond to somebody else changes the relationship and the pattern and the cycle that Bongi spoke about. So the power is actually in your hands, and it's up to you to try it. So I really do encourage you to try these techniques and then practice, practice, practice. So it goes into your subconscious and you can do it without thinking. Because that's the trick. And we can't break a pattern. We can only form a new pattern that becomes the default once we've practiced it often enough. 10,000-hour rule, guys.
Completely. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bongi, I saw your sound there.
Yes, I wanted to check if people have questions for us.
So if you want to put it in the chat, otherwise, if you want to unmute, then please do. I just want to stop our recording so that we